Today's service is a little different. Our storytellers are going to be telling lots of sacred stories today, and we're going to begin with the time for all ages.
Good morning, everybody. My story this morning is called The Monk's Heavy Load. And what I'm going to ask is that you pay particular attention to the very last sentence in the story. So on a beautiful spring day, there were two monks, one who was a millennial and one who was a little more of a seasoned monk. And they were traveling from their monastery to a village far, far away to do some trading. Now, where they lived, the paths between the villages were very narrow and rocky and steep and windy. And also that spring had been very warm, so a lot of the snow in the mountains had melted early, and all the streams and rivers were overflowing, and there was a lot of heavy current. So as they're walking along, they came across the stream that they needed to get across. Standing at the edge of the stream was a young woman. Now she needed to cross, but she was very tiny and she was timid and she was afraid. As the young monk approached her, he recalled that during his religious training, he took a vow to never touch a person of the opposite sex. So as he came upon her, he smiled, nodded, picked up the hem of his robe, and proceeded to try to walk across the stream. You can imagine his surprise when out of the corner of his eye, he sees the old monk basically running past him with the woman in his arms. They get across the stream, he puts her down, the woman bows in gratitude and respect. He smiles at her and goes on his way. The young monk realized that his counterpart had gone on ahead of him, so he rushes to catch up. And as they're walking mile after mile and hour after hour, the young monk keeps thinking about what just happened. And he thinks about it and he thinks about it again. And the more he thinks about it, the madder he gets. And finally, after a few hours, he just can't stand it anymore. So he stops in his tracks, he plants his feet, his face is red with rage. And he starts sputtering and yelling at the old monk. He said, "You broke your sacred vow. You vowed you would never touch a woman. How can you forgive yourself? You should not be allowed back in our monastery." The old monk was kind of taken aback. He turned calmly to the young monk and said, "I dropped that woman hours ago. Have you been carrying her all this time?" So that's what I want you to think about is take that sentence with you. And when you have some time, like noodle on that a little bit. How many of you, I know I have held that kind of feeling in your heart, in your brain, like for a really long time. And at the end of the day, what did that really do for you? Probably not anything really good. So I'll leave you with this, as Elsa said and sang in Frozen, you need to just let it go.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to invite you to take a nice deep breath with me, inhaling and exhaling. I'm Sarah Carlson. I'm a member of the worship committee, and I'll be telling you the story called Forgive Others, the story of Ganesha. Once, Lord Ganesha was invited to a big feast, and there were many dishes and sweets prepared for him. As a revered Hindu god, Ganesha was pleased with this offering. Like many of us, he was especially fond of sweets. So once he started eating, he found it hard to stop. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm eating something really good, I get so swept up in the enjoyment of gluttony and consumption that suddenly I realize I've had way too much. Well, this was the case with Ganesha that day. He noticed that his stomach was swollen and it just made him feel kind of guilty and uncomfortable. Truth be told, it also made him feel a little embarrassed. So, since he didn't want anyone to notice him in such a situation, he grabbed hold of a snake and wrapped it around his stomach to disguise his swollen belly. But even still, he didn't really feel like moving out in such a condition. So he waited for night to fall so that no one would see him. He waited until sunset and it became dark. And Lord Ganesha started out to return to his place. But Moon saw Lord Ganesha. And you know what? He just couldn't contain himself. And he started laughing nonstop, just broke out. Now, we all know it's easy to laugh at someone's overindulgence sometimes, right? But Lord Ganesha did not appreciate this. And in fact, Moon's laughter made him feel even more embarrassed. So Lord Ganesha got really angry and cursed the moon, such that he would be invisible from that day onwards. Hearing this, Moon was shocked and begged for forgiveness. He pleaded and pleaded with Ganesha and implored him to reconsider this harsh punishment. And after a while, Lord Ganesha's temper softened and he wanted to forgive Moon, except he couldn't revoke his curse. So instead, he proclaimed that Moon would grow thinner and thinner each day and only remain invisible for one day a month, which the Hindus call Amavasya, a day they consider inauspicious. Now, in this story, when Moon laughed, Ganesha lashed out in anger and cursed the moon. Have you ever lashed out and done something that you regretted later? While this service is all about forgiveness, and forgiveness is real, once an action is out there, it really can't ever be fully retrieved. And those moments are hard. We may harbor some shame or remorse for our actions. And so we need to cultivate the ability to forgive ourselves. Now, without thinking too much about it, I want you to raise one hand and take a shape with that hand, and take another shape, and another shape, and another shape. And now find some movement that's slow and smooth. And find some movement that's fast and jerky. And now find some movement that's fast and smooth. And some movement that's slow and jerky. And now go ahead and take a moment to explore the full range of motion that hand has around you. And then go ahead and find a moment of stillness in connection with yourself or something near you. And find another place of stillness in connection with yourself or something near you. And let's go ahead and settle back into one last shape. And take a deep inhale and exhale and shake that hand out. So I've just given you some tools to play with. I'm going to put on some music and I'm going to ask you to join me in a short hand dance on behalf of forgiving ourselves.
Go ahead, Pete.
Good morning. My name is Pete Pellegrino, and I'm going to tell you a story that has maybe a little different take on forgiveness. Can you forgive someone who has done you serious wrong? Can you do that, or should you? I'm going to read the story, and then we'll have a few minutes in a breakout room to talk about that. So this is a parable of Jesus that appears in the book of Luke, chapter 7, and I'm sure you've heard this. It's called the prodigal son. There was a man who had two sons, and the younger son came up to dad one day and said, "Dad, how about giving me my estate, my share of the estate that I'll eventually get? I'd like to have it now if you could manage that." And the father said, "Okay," and he divided the estate and gave his younger son the proceeds. And a few days later, Sonny boy packs everything up and moves away to a very, very distant land, where, as you can imagine, he spends the loot on, loose living, as it is called, and eventually runs out of money. After that, a great famine appears across this land. Nobody has anything to eat. And the son finds himself in want, meaning he's hungry. So he aligns himself with a local citizen who gives him a job as a swineherd, feeding the pigs. Pretty low-level job, even worse than McDonald's. And the son does this, and finally he begins to realize that he would eat anything the pigs were eating, for one thing, because he didn't have anything to eat. And he came to realize that the servants in his father's house were living and eating better than he was in his current situation. So he decides he's going to go home, as many youngins do. And he said to himself, "I am going to throw myself on the mercy of my father and ask because I am not worthy of him or of heaven, and I'm going to beg him to make me one of his servants, because that's about what I deserve." So he got his stuff together, what was left of it, and went home. And he was quite a distance away when his father saw him, rushed out to meet him, embraced him, kissed him, called to his servant and said, "Bring the finest robe that we have. Bring a ring. Bring sandals for my son's feet, for he is dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, and now he is found." Sound familiar? So father continues, "Let's kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a party. We're really going to celebrate this for once. We're going to celebrate it." And the son says, "Father, I have sinned against you in heaven, so I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father chose to ignore that. Servants brought the robe and so forth, killed the fatted calf, which, by the way, is the best of the animals, and started to party. Everybody went in the house, started to party. So the older son, he's out in the field working. He comes back and he hears all party noises inside the house, and he says to one of the servants, "What's going on?" And the servant says, "Your little brother came home, and your father's really happy about that. So he has had this party for the little boy." And the older son is like, "I am angry. I'm pissed off, pardon me. I'm not going in there." So eventually the father comes out and he says to the son, "Come on in, come on in, join the fun, join the fun." And the son says, "I worked my butt off for you for years, year in and year out. I did everything you asked me to do, but I never got the fatted calf. I never got a party to entertain my friends. I never got anything, and I'm angry. And this son of yours, he devoured all the money that you made, or at least most of it, and you kill for him the fatted calf." And the father replied, "Son, you are always with me. All that is mine is yours. It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for this your little brother was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, and now he is found." And that's the end of the story. So we don't really know what happened with the older brother. Can he forgive his father? Can he forgive his little brother? Can he forgive himself, if there's anything to be forgiven there? How do you do that? How do you forgive someone who has really done you wrong? Well, we'd like to think about that a little bit in a breakout room, which we can do now, and we'll discuss this for a couple of minutes and see what you think. Breakout room time and dance.
Wendy's going to tell us a story now. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Wendy Simpson, and I'm going to be telling you the parable of the unforgiving servant. This is found in the book of Matthew in the New Testament. And as you listen to this story, I want you to think about how you can make your life miserable by harboring animosity towards somebody. Then Peter asked Jesus, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother or my sister who sins against me? As many as 7 times? And Jesus replied, not just 7 times, but as many as 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who decided to settle accounts with all of his servants. When he began to settle accounts, they brought to him a servant who owed him 10,000 bags of gold. Now, this could be as much as 100 days' wages or as much as many years of wages. And this servant didn't have enough to pay it back. So his master ordered that he be sold, along with his wife, his children, and everything he had, and the proceeds used to pay the debt. But that servant fell to his knees and kneeled before his master. And he said, please be patient with me, and I will pay you back. And the master took compassion on him, released him, and forgave the entire debt. Then that servant went out and he found one of his fellow servants, a man who owed him 100 coins. He grabbed that servant around the neck and he said, pay me back my money. Then that servant fell down and begged him, be patient with me, I'll pay you back. But he refused. Instead, he threw him into prison, where he would remain until he paid back his debt. Now his fellow servants, when they saw what had happened, they were deeply offended. They went and they told their master all that they had heard. The master called that first servant to him and said, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you appealed to me. Now, shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? The master was furious. He handed that prisoner over to the guard responsible for torturing prisoners, where he would remain until he had paid back his debt. Jesus said, my brothers and sisters, the Lord will do the same to you if you don't forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Now, we don't need a prison guard to torture ourselves, to torture us. We tend to torture ourselves and create our own hell. We don't need even to believe in a God to create our own hell. When we harbor animosity towards one another or really forget to forgive somebody that really requires our forgiveness. So I'd like you to think about, what would you like to let go of? And I am inviting you to put your answer in an answer card, and we're going to create a word cloud, and the link can be found in the chat. And it's just a short 1 or 2 word answer. So I would invite you to do that now.
You're going to have to go to the actual link in the chat to put your answer in the word cloud. Don't put it in the chat. Go to the link in the chat, and we'll look at the word cloud when we wrap up the service. We'll take a look and see what it is that you want to let go of. All right, I invite you to shake off or take a deep breath or get set for another story. I'm Pastor Madelyn. If you weren't here at the beginning of the service, I'm going to tell you the story of Cain and Abel. This is from the book of Genesis, chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. The man, Adam, knew his wife, Eve, intimately. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain, and she said, I have given life to a man with Holy One's help. She gave birth a second time to Cain's brother Abel. Now, Abel tended the flocks, and Cain farmed the fertile land. Sometime later, Cain made an offering to Holy One from the gatherings, the fruits of the land. And Abel made an offering from the eldest offspring of the flocks with their fat. Holy One looked favorably upon Abel and his sacrifice, but didn't look favorably upon Cain and his sacrifice. Cain became very angry and looked resentful. And Holy One said to Cain, why are you so angry? Why do you look resentful? If you do the right thing, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do the right thing, sin will be waiting for you at the door, ready to strike. It will entice you, but you must rule over it. Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out into the field. And when they were out in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Holy One said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain said, "I don't know. Am I my brother's guardian?" Holy One said, "What did you do? Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. You are now cursed from the ground that opened up its mouth to take your brother's blood from your hand. When you farm the fertile ground, it will no longer yield anything for you. And you will become a roving nomad on the earth." Cain said, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Now that I am to be driven from the fertile land and driven from your presence, I will become a roving nomad, and anyone who sees me will kill me." Holy One said, "It won't happen. Anyone who kills Cain will be paid back 7 times. And Holy One put a sign on Cain so that no one who saw him would assault him. And Cain left Holy One's presence and settled down in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Oh, beloveds, I think that sometimes we start to think that forgiveness means forgetting, or that forgiveness means saying, "That's okay." And that's not what forgiveness really means. There is no cheap grace. We forgive so that we don't carry heavy burdens ourselves. We forgive so that we don't eat ourselves up inside. But restorative justice does not ask that we forget. It does not ask that there be no atonement. In the story of Cain and Abel, I think we are meant to identify with Cain. Notice that Cain never expresses remorse. He's only concerned with his own well-being. The Holy One had invited Cain into conversation. Cain never engaged in that conversation, but only acted out in his anger. How often do we think only of ourselves and how a situation affects us directly? without stopping to think about our siblings. We have heard many stories of forgiveness today, forgiveness in different ways. Let us hold these stories. Let us remember that we must forgive ourselves. And we must treat each other with fairness and kindness. And what is put out there, what is done cannot always be undone. Yet we can learn and move forward and do better each time. May we continue to tell our story. The story isn't finished. Let us make a happy ending. Namaste.